I think the hardest problem I'm going to have with that is trying to live up to being a gentleman. My name is Art Beichman. I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic. It's nice to be back in the Salem area. I do have residence in Blacksburg, and I'm only temporarily in Northern Virginia. And it really was a pleasure to come back and see my friends. For those of you who are at your first meeting, or if you're down from the treatment center and anything I say tonight makes no sense to you, that's all right. Don't judge this program by me. Please keep coming back. I know for myself, when I first came into these rooms to Alcoholics Anonymous, I began to learn something about myself. And I was ready, and if I told you it was an easy trip, I would be lying to you. I had to go through a lot of hell to get where I am today, because I had to start facing myself, the person that I kept running away from. And I have no idea what I'm going to talk about tonight. The first time I talked here many years ago, I was so frightened I had it all typed out in case I forgot my story. That got down to an outline. Now I have a couple notes, and most of the notes are on the promises. And it's really a pleasure to have them read at AA meetings on a regular basis. And I remember the first time I heard them read, I really wondered if those things could come true, because that was something I chased while I was drinking, because I wanted something that a lot of other people had. And it's something I chased when I was in Alcoholics Anonymous until I learned to do the program what I would consider the right way. I'd like to share some of that with you tonight. When I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous because I was tired of just being sick and tired. I knew I had a drinking problem. I knew when I picked up a drink that I couldn't stop. And I didn't do it very often in the beginning, but even then, when I first started in college, I didn't drink to have fun. I drank to get drunk, and I did it every time. And if I couldn't afford it, I would borrow money from friends and roommates and so on so I could get drunk. And I really look forward to it, as sick as that may seem. My wife at the time tried to tell me that I had a drinking problem. And of course, I don't know about your experiences, but wives, and to me, my wife, that didn't count, because I figured she was pretty self-centered and she only had one objective in mind, and that was make sure I didn't lose my job. Not a bad objective when you think about it, but anyway, I heard people talk about alcoholics, and I had this concept that alcoholics were people that lived on Skid Row, and I felt I did not have a problem because I had not lost my job, I had not had a DUI, nothing was really going wrong. I used to say I was not in financial difficulty, but that's a lie. I was always borderline on that. But almost everything that was going on in my life was quite successful. And I really didn't think I had a drinking problem. I thought perhaps maybe my family had an attitude problem. And I reminded them of that quite often, even in early sobriety, unfortunately. Towards the end, I did a lot of different things to try to control drinking because I knew something was wrong. I would switch drinks. I was finally down to cheap white wine. Carlo Rossi, if you're interested in hot cuisine of wines, it's terrible. And I tried all the tricks I could think of. You know, I would walk to work and walk home from work, and it was like 2.5 miles each way, and I figured if I walked, I'd at least burn off the calories that I got when I was drinking, and I promised myself I would never stop to pick up a drink, but there's this little speedy mark near on the path home, and I always make a detour and pick up a bottle. And the neighbors always saw me carrying this bottle home. If the kids saw me, they would say things to their mother, and I would not understand what they were trying to say. And I remember my son, who's now 19, one time saying, "Damn it, he's got a bottle again. He just came back in the house," and his mother said, "Sorry, son, there's not much we can do about it. He's got a disease." And that really ticked me off, because she was trying to explain what my problems were. And at that time, I suspect she knew more about alcoholism than I did. I wasn't still ready to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. She even knew where the meetings were and had pointed out the church where they met and suggested I might try them in Blacksburg. And I couldn't do that because, you see, the church was very near our house, and I figured the neighbors would see it in my car, and they would think I might have a drinking problem. Well, I live in a section of town. There's only one road that goes into the subdivision and one road that comes out, and they always saw me carrying this bottle with me, but, you know, it never dawned on me that they would think anything else that I was an alcoholic, and I did have a drinking problem. I couldn't even carry an intelligent conversation when they came by the house to borrow tools and things, and I'd always give them the wrong tools. Little things like that. But something began to happen. One of the things I can credit my wife with, and that was that she quit covering for me. And she did a couple of things that I knew were quite difficult for her to do. And one day I got up and felt like I had the flu again. I had the flu a lot, and I'm sure you all can relate to that. And I wanted her to call up and tell them at work I was going to be late, I had the flu, and she said, no, I can't do that. You're going to have to do that yourself. And I was very PO'd about that. But I do remember being very frightened by that, because I knew that if she didn't do that and I had to do it myself, that I was going to have to face an issue about myself that I did not want, and that was I might have a drinking problem. She did that one more time. And something else happened about that time. I got quite sick, and I used to go to work pretty early in the morning. I always beat the secretaries in the morning so that I'd look like I was doing a good job. I always left after they left, put in the inordinate hours. Workaholism was another addiction of mine. And one time when one of the maids came in the room and found me laying on the floor, I was actually taking a nap trying to get off a hangover, but she thought I had died. And scared the daylights out of her, but I assured her it was okay, but she knew something was wrong too. And I remember calling the doctor, and I wanted an appointment, and I know doctors always kept a few slots open for late afternoon, and I lied to get in. And they said, what was wrong? And I said, oh, nothing, it's just a male problem, I can't talk about it on the phone. And think about that one for a second. Anyway, I managed to get an appointment, and he checked me over for a variety of things, and he said, everything's okay, and I said, no. And for the first time in my life, I was honest, and I said, no, sir, if I pick up a drink, I can't stop. I know that. And something is wrong. And he told me the only thing I could do was go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I thought for sure he had been talking to my wife, because, But it made some sense to me to hear him talk about that. And he told all the things that he could do, and I really wanted a pill, and I wanted somebody to cure all of this for me. And he said, I can't do that. He says, if you want to stop drinking for yourself, you can. And this is the only way that I know that works. And it turned out later I found out his father was a member of the program, and he understood things that I did not understand. And I told him I can't go to Alcoholics Anonymous because, you see, I'm a college professor, and I've got all these degrees and all this, arrogant crap. And he looked at me and he said, you're going to be real surprised. And I was. And I have been, and I continue to be amazed, because it doesn't matter who we are, what we do for a living. We're here for the same reason. And we're here because we have a problem with alcoholism. And I can only tell my part of the story, and your story is going to be somewhat different, and that's fine. That still did not get me to Alcoholics Anonymous. I still did not know where to go. I did actually look for meetings in Blacksburg, and the referral number always went to Mental Health Association, and I figured something was wrong, and that's not supposed to happen that way. That's for people who are really sick and insane, and that was not an issue that I had. But I finally did get a phone number, and I am embarrassed to admit, even to this day, that when the person on the other end, when I finally got the person on the phone, it was an uneducated, rural, non-white voice, and I was too proud to tell him that I had a drinking problem. I've since made amends to that man, because he has taught me an awful lot about Alcoholics Anonymous and serenity of living, and it's okay. But then I ended up in a meeting, and I really believe God works, and my higher power is God, that he works in very mysterious and strange ways in his own time. And I happened to be going to a meeting in Northern Virginia with one of my own graduate students, who was a little bit older than most people. He was a career military man, and they had sent him on for a degree, and we started talking about alcohol. I don't know why. And he knew too much. He just knew too much about alcohol. And he started telling me about all these things the officers' clubs would do and things, and I thought, my God, Tom, are you an alcoholic? And he looked at me and he says, no. He says, I'm an Al-Anon. And it dawned on me that I had never met his wife in the 2 years prior to that. And it came around, and we had like 5 hours in the car, so you got a lot of time to reflect. And I finally got enough courage to say, Tom, did you ever think I'd have a drinking problem? And he said no, and he gave me every answer I ever wanted to hear. You're successful, you're at work on time, you treat people with respect, da-da-da-da-da. It sounded really great. And I had to say, no, Tom, that's not true. If I pick up a drink, I can't quit. That was the next time I was really honest with myself. And he said, would you like to go to an AA meeting? And I said, yes, but I'm scared. I'm not going to go to Blacksburg. You've got to understand. And he said, I understand that. My wife will understand that. He said, would you like to go to this meeting on Wednesday nights at Lewis Gale Hospital? And I remember he and his wife taking me to, and my wife to this particular meeting on Wednesday nights, which met in the room with that god-awful painting on the wall. I mean, no recovering alcoholic or anybody who thinks they have a drinking problem should come in that room and look at that picture, because it doesn't make sense, you know. And my whole life was distorted the way it is, and I saw this painting, and I'm going, my God, what is that? The other part of that meeting that was rather amusing was Billy B., and I won't say anything more about him, was chairing that night. And I have very fond memories of that night. And he was sitting there drinking out of one white cup and expectorating in the other white cup, and I kept waiting for him to mix the two cups. And he must have done that because he tells me he doesn't chew anymore, so that's a good sign, I guess. And he started off that meeting. We were late, so the next best thing that can happen to you when you're late around here at the meeting is you get to sit at the front of the room facing everybody else, and that was not pleasant. And he talked about the meeting. It started off much the way it did tonight, and he said, and we'll start with the person on my right, which happened to be my wife. And she made some comment about drinking, and somebody that she cared about had a drinking problem, and they came to me and I said, I'm told I have a drinking problem. That's all I could say about it. But something neat happened in that meeting for me. The first thing that happened in that meeting that really meant a lot to me was I was ready to compare myself out. I was convinced I had a drinking problem. I knew I had a drinking problem, but I didn't think I was an alcoholic. And I wanted you people to give me all these excuses that I was not an alcoholic. Instead, what happened in that meeting, I heard people talking about feelings. I heard them talking about fear. I heard them talking about things I could not talk to anybody about because I was afraid if I let myself be exposed that people would not like me, including my family. And as that meeting progressed and people talked to them, the issue was step one. My friend's wife, Donna, made sure step one got discussed that night. That was the volunteered topic. I knew that I was in the right place, and I knew that I was going to come back to the meeting the next time. Even if I had to wait a week, I was going to come back. The second, one of the other things that happened in the meeting that was very special to me was that at the end of the meeting, as I was trying to sneak out, and I don't know what your first meeting was like, but I knew I was in the right place, but I wanted to get out there as quickly as possible because I was afraid somebody would talk to me and I wouldn't know how to talk to them. And somebody grabbed my hand and said, we care. And spent another few minutes talking about Alcoholics Anonymous and what the fellowship had to offer. And I think that made a difference to me. It made a real difference to me because then I really knew that I belonged, and that happens to be Doug, and he is my sponsor. So here I had two people, a graduate student who really he owed me nothing, a person in the fellowship who didn't even know me, and yet two people, total strangers literally, cared. And if that doesn't make an impression on you, I want you to know it really made an impression on me. It didn't matter if my family cared about me, because I could write that off, or I could deny that and justify that any way possible. But how do you deny somebody who you don't even know says that they care about you, and we think we have a program that will work for you? That stuck. And I hope it continues to stick on a daily basis, because that's the only way I can work this particular program. And as I said, it hasn't been easy. Well, I kept coming back. You people had something I wanted. You had something that I was chasing. You had some serenity. You were laughing about things. I remember Tom says now, when you come to this meeting, he said, I'm going to tell you, there's a couple things I should warn you about. He told me a little bit about the steps. And he says, people hug a lot. And I thought, gee, that's pretty good. I could use that. I haven't been hugged in a long time, really. And I thought maybe it was an experimental California group or something like that. I was game for anything like that. But he also said, when people start talking about their experiences, they're going to laugh about things, and your wife probably won't think they're funny. But he said, if you find yourself chuckling on the inside, you might want to consider the possibility that you might have a drinking problem. And I laughed inside. I wouldn't assure you on the outside I was laughing at that meeting, but I could identify also through the laughter when you talked about some of the drinking escapades, some of the feelings that you had that you wouldn't tell other people. And it made me feel really good. And, I don't know what tomorrow is going to be, but I know I didn't have to take a drink today. And life has put me through some real rough spots in the last year that I'll touch on a little bit. And the neat thing is I know through this program and through things like the Serenity Prayer and having sponsors, I don't have to take a drink if I don't want to. I have some other options. And it's very, very nice. This program doesn't come easy. It didn't come easy for me. And I remember, people reading, when he was reading about the promises, that for some people they come quickly and some people they come slowly, and I'm one of these people who learn slowly to do various things. When I started reading the 12 steps, I made the mistake of being at a meeting sometime where somebody said, you don't have to necessarily take these in order, and I thought that was a good deal. I liked that idea, because I was going down these things. I could handle the powerlessness over alcohol. I would admit that my life was unmanageable yet, and it would have only been a matter of time, because I'd done a lot of things that I should have been picked up for. I should have had DUIs. I had a blackout once, leaving with my van full of my children from a party at Claytor Lake, driving down mountain roads. I remember going off the road, shortly leaving the lake park. I do not remember getting home. And I remember waking up in the morning and going out and looking to make sure the van was there. And then I checked each of the bedrooms to make sure the kids were okay. I don't know what they went through that night. I don't even know how I got down a mountain road, because I couldn't even drive down a straight line. And I made it, and it was a pure blackout. And that was frightening to me. Came to be that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, I thought that was easy, because I was raised in one of these households where we went to church all the time, and I figured if I kept going to church, something good might come out of that. God would understand, but I never felt really good about going to church because I knew that I was not good. Does that make sense? But I sat there and I saw this, and I said, power girl, that one's going to be real easy and will restore us to sanity. Well, that's easy. I'm not insane. I have no problems. Well, in my early sobriety, I had to address this step in a different way. A man that I had worked with very closely for a number of years, when I got sober, I knew the relationship was not a good one, and I had to break off of it if I wanted to be sober and maintain some sobriety. Tried to pull every trick in the book, and it really hurt. And we had worked together for 15 years. And I figured I could handle this. It hurt so bad, and just to show, and I'll be honest with you, I wanted to kill him. I even thought of how I was going to do it, and then I was going to blame it on insanity due to alcoholism. That's when this stuff began to make some sense, and this was after about 6 to 8 months of not drinking that I had a lot of work to do. The interesting thing about that was I would come up here and I would see Doug, and I never called Doug. I never called a sponsor for quite a few years. I always just came up here early. Thank God he made coffee all the time. And I always come an hour early hoping he'd be here, and he'd always be here, and we could talk for a while. And he kept saying, let go and let God, and that would work good until after the meeting. I'd get back in the car and get halfway to Blacksburg, and God gave it back to me because I took it. But he always threw in a little bit more, and next week get a little more miserable. I'd think about doing this, and to this man, and anyway, so finally about the third time, I got tired of hearing Doug say this. I thought, well, what the hell, nothing else has worked. I came back to the university, and something had happened, and I ended up going to some higher-ups to just defend myself on things that I knew were not true. And they said, we are tired of this. We know you haven't done this. What can we do? And there was nothing else to do. The man, left to his own devices, took care of it for me. But the interesting part about it is I felt sorry for him. This is the man a couple weeks earlier that I would have seriously thought about doing away. And the boy, he was going to suffer too. I had it all really figured out. And I'm glad I didn't have to do that. Some of those days I used the Serenity Prayer, I'll bet you 1,000 times. That's all I would do. I'd walk them down the halls muddling the Serenity Prayer. But it worked. Coming back to believe in a power greater than myself was not easy. I had faked it for a long time. My idea, as I told you, was to be active in the church and pretend and make contributions on a monthly basis and serve on all these committees. And I became the first lay communion assistant of the church, and I thought that was really great. And I was, had a hangover the morning I was asked to do it. It was an emergency type of thing because it was confirmation Sunday. And the visiting pastor had the flu, and the church was packed because all these kids were getting confirmed, one of whom happened to be my daughter. And the pastor came up and said, "We've talked about it long enough, would you like to do it?" And I said, "No." Well, that took about 3 minutes, you know. Alcoholic's ego says, "Yes, I will." And I ended up walking into church with a gown on, and my family sitting there going, "What in the devil is happening now?" You know, the looks on their face were incredible. And I don't know if you've ever helped give communion, but I want to tell you, on the other side of the railing, it's very frightening, particularly when you know that something is wrong with you. And I swore everybody in that church knew that I was an alcoholic, and I had this mental argument with God while I'm dispensing communion, saying, "This is the dirtiest trick you have ever pulled on me." Well, he didn't pull it on me, or she. I accepted the responsibility. And that also began to be part of the process of beginning to deal with myself. I even bought a cross. I figured if everybody wore a cross, that protected you against all kinds of things. Didn't work too well. The best thing that happened was the chain kept pulling on the chest hairs, and it hurt like the devil. So I had a feeling in my heart all right, but it wasn't the one I wanted. So I had to get rid of it, and I still I keep it for historical value now. Because I can look at it and really laugh at all of the games I tried to play to prove that I was a good person, when all along I never believed that I was. And I never believed that I had that capability. And it doesn't matter if that comes out of my upbringing or if it's part of my own fabrication of myself. The point is, I didn't think I was a very nice person, in spite of people telling me that I was. I could not accept it. I couldn't believe it. And I worked very hard to prove that I was something that I wasn't, and I paid my prices for that too. I had an opportunity to speak at a meeting a number of years ago near the ocean, and I'm one of these guys, I make my living working in water pollution, but I don't know how to swim. And I was at this meeting, and I'd given my talk, and I thought, well, I'll go out in the ocean, and I don't know why I did that, because I had no business being there. And I remember getting caught in the undertow and being pulled out and tried to swim back, and I couldn't do it. And this may mean nothing to you, but for me, this is my experience. And I'd ended my talk the night before saying, I don't know what God has in store for me, but one of the things I would hope by being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous is having the dignity to die a fruitful life and to be sober. Well, I wasn't quite ready to accept that the next day, and I'm sitting here. I was sitting here fighting. I was exhausted. I was swallowing seawater, and I had this big argument with God. Bill, you better believe it was a good argument too. And I'm sitting there going, just because I said it last night, I'm not ready. This isn't fair. You don't understand. You can't do this. And then finally dawned on me, I might get my wish. And I said, okay, it's all yours. And the most incredible calm came over my body that I've never experienced in my life until recently another experience came as close. And 2 waves later, I was laying on the shore. And I figured God's not done with me yet. The next day, a man drowned at the same spot, doing the same thing. Doesn't mean he wasn't ready. That's not a judgment call, but it shows you where I was in my life. And that made me realize that maybe I had something to do yet. And that I don't know what God has in store for me. And we'll only find out a day at a time. That's all I can do. Well, chasing serenity after you quit drinking is not easy. It wasn't for me. And I started doing a lot of volunteer work, and some of it was with AA, and that was very beneficial, and it helped me a lot. But I chased things in other ways too. Just like I chased being involved in church because I knew there was something there for me. I thought, but I didn't know how to get it. So I thought if I did all these good things, well, I started volunteering for crisis hotlines and working with students who were addicted and all these kinds of things. And all the people who worked with them, many of them had a certain sense of serenity. And I figured, if they do this, they get serenity from that. And if I do it, I will get serenity too. And it didn't work out that way. Oh, I did gain some things. I don't want that to be a negative. But I didn't get what I was looking for. When I came into this program, and as I said earlier, and I saw all these steps, and I started playing games with these steps, and I would go 1, 2, 3, and then I would jump down to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and I'd skip 4 and 5. I was definitely afraid of 4 and 5 because I knew I would have to be honest with myself. And it was very hard. And like I said, I'd been at a meeting where somebody said, you have to take the steps, so if you don't take them in order, don't worry about it, it'll work out. Well, I want to tell you folks, it's my personal opinion that you have to take these in order. And God's as patient as anybody, and some sponsors are patient, darn them. But eventually we do get to do them in order. And I had an experience about 2 months ago that was very rewarding for me. And actually it goes back to about Christmas. And being dislocated from here, I picked up another temporary sponsor, or a temporary sponsor who was active in the church that I was attending, and the marriage had finally hit where it was going to hit, and it meant that we were going to split up, and it was very difficult, and we were already separated. And I was going through all this self-pity and all this garbage and wanting people to take care of me and feel sorry for me and do all these things for me. And I finally asked this other guy, I said, I need to talk to somebody. He said, fine, let's go out for lunch. And 2 days after about the second lunchtime, he looked at me and he says, you know, you're a sorry sack of manure. And he says, until you do something and do it right, you're not going to be worth anything to anybody. Why would he need to hear that, you know? And I said, what do you mean? He says, you never did fourth and fifth step correctly, did you? Oh, well, yeah, I did, you know. I told Doug some of these things, and I told this counselor some of these things, and I went to that person. I told him, he says, you never did it right, did you? And I said, well, yes, I did. And I told this person some more, and he says, you've never done it right. When are you going to do it right? And just before that, I read in the 12 and 12 that part where it says those last 3 or 4 little pieces you hang on to, that you won't tell anybody, even your sponsor, much less God, even though God already knows. Well, there were a couple things I had hung on to, things that I was really ashamed of, and things that I knew I had to deal with. Well, this guy is a different type of sponsor. I need to share this with you because it just floored me. It's the illusion of choice. I liked it. No, I didn't like it. He said, 3, do 4, and 5, nothing's going to work right in your life, and you might as well face the fact you're going to have to do it. I said, fine, I agree. He said, fine, this Sunday or next. And I said, what do you mean, this Sunday or next? He said, this Sunday or next. You're going to do 4 or 5, you're going to do it or not. If you're not, go get another sponsor. I said, well, okay, this Sunday I've been putting off. He says, fine, the minister's ready. I said, what? He said, well, the pastor's ready. I said, you talked to the pastor about this? He says, yeah. He says, well, you want a sponsor or do you want a sponsor? Get out of here if you don't want a sponsor. I said, well, that's all right. And he said, that's all right. The minister's been through this. He said, and I knew that 5 members of the congregation had done their 5th step with him. And that made some sense to me. And I sat down for the first time in my life and did the 4th step, or did it, and I can't say I did it correctly because I'm going to probably have to do it over again many, many times. But for this stage in my life, I put down those 4 or 5 things that I had hung on to that I could not tell anybody. And at the same time, I was attending a workshop that the university paid for. Virginia Tech has paid for a lot of my serenity and sobriety, and they don't even know what they've done. And it's really great to have pull that on your employer. But anyway, I teach a course on alcoholism, and they send me to various workshops to learn more about alcoholism. And they really, you teach what you have to learn, and you go to the workshops to help fill in the gaps in your life. And I was at that stage in my life where, maybe this will make sense to you, there's a picture of the Earth from outer space, and there's the blue Earth, and then it's all black all the way around. When I came into AA, and this is not a criticism of AA, this is an evaluation of where art was. When I came into AA, I could easily put the part of the puzzle together that was the Earth. That was Art the Alcoholic. But I had these other 2,000 pieces that were all black. And there was no logic in the way they fit together, and being a scientist, everything's got to be logical or it doesn't count. And I'm very analytical about things. I always have been. And I sat with those pieces for a long, long time. Doing steps 4 and 5 helped some of those pieces fall into place, but I still needed a little bit more work, and I ended up seeing a therapist again. And to make a long story short, me and the therapist happened to be in the same workshop. And they were working with a man who was a 10-year recovering alcoholic who had hit a blank wall, and his life just didn't seem like it was getting any better, and I hooked into him immediately. And what he was talking about were all the things that I was dealing with that I still really hadn't told my therapist about in so many words. That happened the same weekend I did 4 and 5. And in that workshop, which was Friday and Saturday, By Saturday, I knew that I had to do 5 on Sunday, and I knew it was going to be okay, and I really also knew that I could be totally honest for the first time in my life. And I did that, and then saw the therapist a week later, and she knew I had hooked in, because she was watching me like a hawk, and she said, "Why don't we do that exercise together?" And I said, "Well, no, we don't have to. I understand." She said, "No, let's do this. I think there's a piece missing for you yet." And I don't know what you think about therapists, but I have no regrets going to one, and I would encourage anybody to consider that. Anyway, I went through the whole exercise, and for the first time in my life, I was able to look at Art, the little child, and Art, the person who could be his own parent, and began to take care of himself. And God, did that feel good. All the things that happened that weekend were not light bulbs that went off in my life. It was the 4th of July on the mall in Washington, D.C., and I don't know if you've ever had the pleasure of a wild 4th of July, but it's wild. All of a sudden, puzzle pieces fell into place in my life. Things that never made sense to me, going through logical processes, fell into place and made sense. And all of a sudden, I could see the outer border of my puzzle forming a boundary of Art Bikema and who he was and who he could be if he gave himself some credit to believe in that. And I have a long ways to go yet. But all of a sudden, the fear of a bad marriage, fear of interacting with people at work, I was running into some snags, and I was afraid to interact with people. All of those things just disappeared. And I also knew that I could stick up for what I believe in, and I knew I would be wrong sometimes, and it was okay, and I didn't have to be perfect, and I didn't have to prove anything to anybody. And I didn't have to throw parties and make friends. I could just be Art Bikema. That felt good. I've never felt that way before for 49 years. And 6.5 years in this program, all of a sudden I felt a certain level of serenity because I was honest with myself for the first time in my life. It felt great. I came to work the next day, and my office mates who I put through a lot of garbage and the depression of a falling apart marriage and everything else, and still blaming myself for a lot of things, and I came back to work, and I just share this with you, and this is not arrogance. They looked at me and said, "What happened this weekend? You've changed. Something has gone on." And they asked me to share it with them. One happens to be a minister. The other one is, well, he may have to deal with a drinking problem. That's his decision. But I felt I had changed. For the first time in my life, I could start projecting out of here and putting my head and my heart together instead of intellectualizing all this garbage and all the stuff I had read in all the books. I started to make connections with things instead of talking about my feelings and about who I was and what I was. And it was okay. And they didn't laugh at me. They hugged me instead. And these are some pretty tough old blanks that I work with in my office. One of them was anyway. And he hugged me. And I'll never forget that. Since that time, other aspects of my life have also gotten very much better. When I came to my first area meeting and gave a talk, I wrote it all out in case I'd miss a particular point and so I could read it. When I gave biology lectures at Tech to students, I was always so afraid I would be wrong here. I have all this experience, but I was afraid I was the one that's going to be wrong. I'd be real nervous. I'd go to the bathroom 10 times before lecture and then almost feel like I had to go while I was giving a lecture because I'd be so nervous. That's also because I drank 10 cups of coffee before I got there. Whatever. A lot. Well, I had an experience a couple of weeks ago with an environmental issue, and I was asked to be a summary speaker at a potentially hostile workshop up in Alaska. And I went up there, and it turned out that the talk I prepared was not going to be appropriate. For one thing, I was supposed to be the summary speaker, but everybody else had the same common agenda, so everybody started summarizing everybody before them. And when you're the 40th speaker and everybody's already summarized everybody else's summaries, what do you summarize? I threw my talk away. Just totally threw it away. Well, 99% of it. And got up and gave a talk that I was very comfortable giving. And one of the things that made it comfortable was I had nothing to be afraid of because I knew my subject and I knew how it could relate to what they were dealing with. But one of the other things that happened in the workshop, and this has to do with the oil spill, when the impact on the Indian tribes, and the Indians started talking about spirituality and what they had lost in a sense of their own value and belief system. And I'll tell you, as a recovering alcoholic, everything they said made lots of sense when they started talking about spirituality. And it was very easy for me to get up and talk about spirituality in another context and feel real good about it. I don't know what they thought about the talk, but I felt like the best talk I've ever given. And I had no notes, and I had no fear, and I got off the podium and felt good. And I have never, ever done that in 20-some years of teaching. I could get off the podium at the end of a lecture and felt I gave a lousy lecture. Students rated me, I always got good ratings, but I always judged myself unmercifully because I knew what went wrong. You know, if I didn't know something, I felt I had failed them. And I've since learned I don't have to do that. I don't have to be everything to all people at all times. I've also learned that I don't have to be in charge of everything, that I can learn to let go. And God, is that a relief. The things I do in my life now, I have to sort out, and I sort them out for the things where I have to have an active involvement, and I can let the rest of it go, because no matter what happens, it's really unimportant as far as my life is concerned. It's not going to make my life better or worse, and I don't have to waste my time and energy worrying about other people's problems. And I've been able to do that now, including in the Washington, D.C. area, which is a challenge in its own right, and even that's gotten better. I'm looking forward to coming back to the university, though. I like the serenity of the mountains. I can't find that in Washington, D.C. I'll be honest about that. In all this time, ever since I was a little kid and as far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be happy. And I would always try to imitate other people to try to be happy. I tried to imitate what they did. I would imitate what they bought. I would imitate what they tried to be, anything to fake it, and it never worked. And it wasn't until I got into this program and could start finally getting honest with myself and my own feelings in here and let you know what they are. And I've cried at these meetings and I've done all of those things and it's okay. When I did that, I began to get in touch with myself. And I want to tell you, it is one neat trip. I can get up in the morning now and I can look in the mirror and I can laugh at myself. And I can say, yeah, you screwed up at a particular meeting. Even when I go to the bathroom at work, I always look in the mirror and kind of look at myself and start smiling. Oh, you goofed up, so what? You're human. It's all right. I always say, yeah, you did a good job. Self-affirmation comes from the inside. I don't have to worry about what other people think about me. And I want to, it's liberating. So much money, time, and energy has been invested in my life making other people the object of what I was looking for. And if they were happy, I was supposed to be happy. But when they were happy, I was never happy because I never felt inside that I was anybody. And now I'm beginning to find, by doing the steps the correct way and getting some help to deal with some childhood issues where I could become my own parent of sorts, I want to tell you, I can get up in the morning, I can hear birds sing, I can smell flowers now, and I take time to do that. I structure my life so I do what I need to do. I go to meetings more now than I ever have, and I really enjoy them. And one of my favorite meetings in Northern Virginia is the 11th Step meeting on Sunday night, and I just share that because I've never been to one, and I want to tell you that's a trip in its own right. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. I feel for once in my life that the promises are real. I got a long ways to go, and don't pretend I've got it, because I don't. But I've found a door that's open that I hope will never close. And as long as I believe in my higher power, whom I choose to call God, and keep in contact with people in the program and keep pushing forward, and I'll make mistakes, and it's all right, these promises are going to come true. And I'm going to read them again if you didn't hear them the first time. We're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. Yeah. We won't regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. Now I've made my mistakes. I've made my amends to those I need to amend. And probably a few that'll still come up, but that's all right. The door is open, I can look back at it. It's an experience I don't want to repeat, and I don't have to. I can't shut the door on it, and I don't want to shut the door on it. I keep coming to these meetings to hear young people and new people in the program share their experience, strength, and hope, and to hear the old-timers share their experience, strength, and hope, because it keeps me in touch with where I can go back if I want to, and I don't have to if I don't want to, as long as I work a program in the right way. We'll comprehend the word serenity and we'll know peace. It's really nice to go to bed at night and sleep and wake up in the morning feeling like I've got a good night's rest. It's incredible. And I can sit there, and I was sitting up at Mountain Lake this morning just kind of watching across the lake, and it was raining, and the fog came in, and it was just incredible. The birds were singing, the rain was dripping in the lake. It was very nice, and the company I was with was incredible as well. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. I don't know how far I've gone. All I know is I've gone as low as I hope I have to go, and I hope that something I say will mean something to you. Feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We'll lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Yeah, that's really neat to know that I can grow with life rather than fight it. Fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. So I still have a little problem with the economic insecurity issue yet, but anyway, that will come to resolution here soon, I hope. But I'm not afraid of people, and I'm not afraid of myself, and I'm not afraid of being alone, because I know I'm not alone. I'm not alone because I have a higher power that I can trust in, and I'm not alone because I have people in programs anywhere I go in the United States. We will know intuitively how to handle situations that used to baffle us. If I had not gone through what I went through a couple months ago and was up in Alaska, I would have given the talk I prepared, which has been totally irrelevant to the whole symposium. I would not have known how to handle it, or I would have fumbled so badly I probably would have just got on a plane and left. Well, not quite, but I would have thought about it. But I think the last one is the most important promise. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we cannot do for ourselves. And I look back now, and all the things my parents taught me that I wouldn't listen to, all the things, the people who had serenity, whether they're in a program or not, and there are some that do have that, they had a God of their own understanding that they believed in and trusted in. And even when they hit their bottoms, whatever they are, they had a God that carried them when they weren't willing to acknowledge that. And I firmly believe that now in my own life. I have a courage that I've never had before, and in the promise of the New Day readings, courage for yesterday was defined as the fear that is answered by prayer. I do what I believe in, and that's all I can ask of myself today. Thanks.